Okay, Dreamer, please.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. We'll look at Advent Expedition again, this time with my global account. I've already made 5 videos on Advent Expedition, an overview and 4 guides, so I really urge you guys to check them out for the tips and what to expect of you for Advent Expedition. But here I'll be starting with Teo. We'll go through the bosses one by one. This is my personal team used for global, and I chose to use this particular team in this way because this is what most of the Korean players use as well. Okay, Pascal here is on the boss set, Avenger set I mean, and look at his stats. Okay, so you have a better idea of how to gear your Pascal. He has very high weakness hit, so with Biscuit's buff he can actually reach about 94% of weakness hit, and with Rachel here he actually boosts all the way to 100% weakness hit. Okay, Rachel's here is on the block set, but primarily she's here for the defense down so that you deal more damage to Teo. If you don't want to use Rachel, you can actually use Leo, because Leo actually has a higher defense down percentage, okay, compared to Rachel. If you do enhance his skill, another option could be Chancellor. Chancellor is actually the best version, or rather the best option for defense down. Okay, he actually, once you enhance this skill, it will defense down by 44%, but rarely people are going to have a Chancellor, so we're going to use something more accessible. You can also actually use Asura. Okay, Asura also has a 39% or defense down if you enhance her Spirit Blade. So that's actually 3% more than Rachel, very negligible but still something. Or if you don't want to subject yourself to RNG, Hokin can actually do 39% defense reduction as well upon having just T2. Okay, but of course survivability is a question. Next up we have Biscuit. Biscuit here is on the block set with her skills mostly enhanced. You have to enhance her buff for sure. Miho here for weakness hit damage increase, and she's on the crit set. If you can, you should actually use the Avenger set for her. And I have Kiro here for magic damage boost, okay, up to 17%. If you do enhance a passive, it can go up to 20%, so this is even better. And then on the other side, I'm actually using Daisy. Daisy is on the crit set. I don't really want to change this because she is used in the Ox King. For Vanessa, she's here for defense down passively on the block set. If you actually want to have a more offense Vanessa, you can actually give her the Avenger set as well. And then for Espada, she's on the Avenger set. This one, no questions asked. For Lina here, she's on the block set with HP percentage on the weapons. And finally for Yuri, she is on the Avenger set with 51% crit rate. Adding on with a passive 27%, that's about 78%, and with the crit pad you can definitely ensure that she has 100% crit rate. The reason why I chose this particular formation is so that your team 1 will be able to clear Yeonhee's phase 1 very quickly, and then you will be able to proceed into phase 2 with definitely a good number of turns left, so that you can deal more damage to Yeonhee later on. So of course, just to remind you guys, Advent Expedition is a group effort, so you really need your guild members to come up, you know, to put together all their attempts to kill the boss specified. So remember, Teo will do buff duration reduction, so what you want to do is to actually debuff him first, cast a defense down, and then after he uses Corvus Eclipse, you will continue buffing with Biscuit. Thereafter, cast Miho's bottom skill. Miho's bottom skill will actually apply magic vulnerability, which is something that Rachel doesn't apply. Okay, then thereafter you can start to just throw Pascal's skills. So the idea here is you really need to build up your damage very quickly. I think the tricky part most players may face here is to not be able to two-shot Teo, which is something I personally face myself, so something to look into for sure. The idea of the team here is really to build up Pascal's damage so that he can two-shot Teo, and then you can proceed into phase 2 very early. So here Teo continues to reduce my buff duration, and Biscuit buff only has 1 turn left, and then of course I'll throw in the final Pascal attack, but it doesn't seem to kill, you know, Teo so soon. Just a little bit left, so at this point I'm really just throwing in all the other skills that I have. Take note that you also do not have a healer here, so Miho's lifesteal buff is actually very important to help you survive. And once Teo gets into his immortality, you need to use Biscuit's top skill to remove the buff. Even if Miho dies at this point, even if your entire team dies, it's fine as long as Biscuit is able to do buff removal. So same thing here, upon entering phase 2, what I do is I debuffed Teo first because he's gonna cast Corvus. This is very standard. And then I'll proceed to buff with Daisy. Daisy actually has magic attack boost. She will buff Yuri. And then I'll buff with Lina. Lina will be able to buff your damage output. The reason why I chose to put Lina here is because you really do need some sustain, because as you can see my heroes are actually taking quite heavy damage and Espada just dies here. Yuri is almost gonna die, Daisy as well. So your sustain here is very very crucial, because you are ultimately gonna play in this particular phase for a longer period of time. So do not be afraid to heal if you need to, because I know some players may be thinking this is a score racking mode, so you really just want to do as much damage as you can, but of course healing is still very important. So because Espada died, I'm not able to apply magic vulnerability again, which is very very unfortunate because my Vanessa is not T6. If my Vanessa is T6, she will be able to apply magic vulnerability as well, on whichever skill she uses. So here I'm not able to sneak in the final Yuri attack, otherwise the score can go up further, but I think this is already pretty decent, already an increase from my previous attempts. So yeah, hopefully this gives you a rough idea of how to use these two teams for Teo to get a better score. Next we'll move on to Kyle. Kyle is one of the trickier bosses, because he does buff himself every time you debuff him. So I'm gonna use Shane here. She's on the Avenger set, naturally, with 59% crit rate. Her passive gives her 41%, so I have exactly 100% crit rate. Your crit damage wise, you can try to push higher if possible. For Eileen, she's on the block set. Doesn't really matter what she has because the boss can't actually be shocked, so that's a good thing. For Dylan's, he's on the crit set. For Viscage, she's on the block set. If you need to look at the stats, do pause the video, because yes, I'm trying to go through this pretty fast, and I think some of you guys may want to look at the stats to compare my stats to your stats. For Kagura, she's on the effect hit set. I gave her effect hit because of Tower of Trials. And then for Zeke, he's on the block set. If you want, you can give him the Avenger set, because ultimately he is kind of like a sub DPS, so he can actually do damage. For Rachel, she's on the block set. Rachel here is a bit tricky because, as I said, you don't really want to debuff Kyle, but timing is very important. Ace is on the block set with pretty high block rate, and for Jupi, she's on the Avenger set as well to allow herself to do more damage. If possible, I would want to skill enhance Jupi for this particular purpose, but I have a feeling that in future they are going to replace the DPS for this particular boss. So, I mean, the new DPS will likely be a legendary hero, so it's still okay to actually skill enhance Jupi for the time being, since the materials don't clash. What I do when I enter this particular phase is to just go with the standard buffing. You don't really have to think too much about the skill queue in this particular boss, okay? But the thing is, you want to just keep an eye on the amount of debuffs you're applying on Kyle. Currently, because my Biscuit is enhanced on her basic attack, she will actually land a damage reduction, I believe, on Kyle. So ideally, you will want to cast Lina's buff after he uses his debuff removal skill, so that you will be able to preserve that debuff on Kyle a little longer, and make sure that your Shane uses her attack when the debuffs are on, because Shane does rely on debuffs to do more damage. So technically, if you have more debuffs on Kyle, Shane is going to be doing more damage. As you can see, I kind of did not do too much damage there, and also missed the weakness hit, so that is also an issue here. If you were to use any of Dylan's skill or Eileen's skill, it is also fine. Okay, I think I mentioned before, players try not to use their skills because they may debuff Kao, but I think it's completely fine because I realized that Kao is completely immune to such effects. So they're just kind of like normal attacks if your other skills are on cooldown. So once the buffs are ready to be renewed, you can always just use the skills again to actually buff your damage. Here I kind of misplayed. I was trying to click Lina's buff, but I didn't realize that Eileen's buff was actually cute. So I kind of wasted a skill here, unfortunately. And because I saw that Carl was actually gonna use his debuff cleansing skill, so I actually used Shane's skill first instead of Lina's debuff, which either way doesn't really help me in this case because Shane's skill is already used. So I could have thrown out an additional attack and then use Lina's buff and then use Shane's buff. I think that would have killed him a little earlier because now we have reached turn 50, which means I only have 20 turns left with Droopy. So for Droopy, I always use her bottom skill first to get her in her sniping stance, and then I'll use Rachel's debuff because Carl already used his cleanse. Okay, he already used the debuff removal skill, so I think I'm fine to use the debuff here. So upon landing a debuff, quickly use Droopy's attacks to make sure she lands it within this window because Kao actually has very fast skill cooldown, and as you can see, he removes the debuffs again to buff himself. So unfortunately, the second attack is gonna look very bad compared to the first attack. And then because Seek is kind of like a sub DPS, I just use his skill, but because he's on the block set, his damage output is very bad. In fact, you can actually go with the 2-3 formation so that Droopy and Seek are at the back to actually buff their attack a little more. So Carl, it's a little challenging, 1.2 million, I think it's okay. I'm pretty sure they're gonna come up with some other new units for this particular raid. Next up we have Yeonhee. Yeonhee is actually one of the more challenging but also the easiest boss. Okay, many players in Korea server have just fully scored 6 mil against Yeonhee. So for the Yeonhee team, I'm just gonna go through the team itself because I believe the gears more or less are the same as what I've shown you guys, but the team composition for Yeonhee is the most important thing. For team wise, I'm actually using 3-2 with the Cleanser, who is my Miho. Miho does debuff removal, so I have to put her in front because Yeonhee actually places sleep on the backline allies. If you do have an alternative, if you don't have Miho at T2, don't worry, there's actually some alternatives you can explore. You can actually use Yeonhee in front, and then you actually use Chloe. Chloe must be on the effect resist set so that she can, not be put to sleep by the first skill that Yeonhee does, and then she can actually cleanse the entire team. So ideally, you want to be able to clear Yeonhee before she uses her sleep again. You can also use Lucy. Lucy is able to actually reset skill cooldowns, or rather decrease skill cooldown for magic units very quickly. Lucy can also cleanse very well, and then you want to put Lucy in front so that she's able to cleanse whoever's on the back. But if you do that, then you will be losing out on damage because again, you want to kill the phase 1 as soon as you can, so having Miho is actually preferred. For team 2, Daisy, Sarah here is for sleep immunity. Many players do not have Sarah, so it's very unfortunate. So please start building your Sarahs because she has sleep immunity. She also has a defense down, active defense down, so it actually stacks with Biscuit's passive defense down. But you do have Jury here, and I know many players also do not have Jury, so this will be the best team you can possibly use against the boss here. And if you really want to look into other team comps, please go watch the Yeonhee guide itself. I have explored many team compositions over there, so I'm very sure you will be able to pick out something. For Jury, very importantly, you need to have the Avenger set on her. Your main win con for Jury is for her to use her follow-up attack as much as possible. Of course, this is very difficult because we cannot control this. It is completely random, so your score is also subjected to her mood. Okay, so if she decides to use more follow-up attacks, then good for you. But if the RNG says no, then your score is gonna be severely low. I won't say low, but it will be directly affected. So I usually buff with Lina first, and then I will use Miho's bottom skill to cleanse. If you have Chloe at this point, use Chloe's top skill to cleanse. And then after that, Miho also lands magic vulnerability with that same skill. So after that, I can safely just continue to throw Ruri's damage attacks and quickly nuke Yeonhee before she uses sleep again. Take note that, you know, her sleep skill cooldown is actually pretty long. Okay, so what you want to do is to actually quickly kill her off. This team is actually pretty strong, but my only lacking point is in terms of damage. My Vanessa is not T6. I have to stress this again. Vanessa being T6 is so important for this particular mode, unfortunately. So I'm trying to get her to T6, but it's not easy. Vanessa being at T6 is going to give her magic vulnerability application on any skill. So that's actually very good. So here Miho cleanses the backline again so that I have enough damage output which I can use, because Miho herself is also quite a good damage dealer here. Yeonhee as well, also a very good damage dealer. And then I will follow up with Ruri's attacks. Make sure if you need to use Lina's top skill to actually land defense down on Yeonhee, Shadow Yeonhee, so that you can actually do more damage within a shorter period of time. But as you can see, we are already on turn 42, 43. So it could be a problem. We are very close, but yes, it's still a problem. One other issue I have had is that as you look on the screen right now, Yeonhee's HP, my Yeonhee's HP is actually very dangerous. So I actually had to heal at some point, unfortunately. So that kind of wasted one turn as well of damage. So moving into phase 2, I will do the typical buffing with Biscuit, with Espada. Unfortunately, Espada landed her exploit vulnerability on the minion and not on Yeonhee, because then my damage could be a lot better. And then I'll also buff with Daisy's top skill. Then I will actually cast defense down with Juri. And with all this set up, you should be able to hit your maximum potential amount of damage once Juri uses her follow-up attack, which is now, as you can see. It does about 50k, 60k per hit. It can go much higher. I've seen Korean players hit about 140k per follow-up attack, okay, on Yeonhee. That is insane. Okay, that is an insane amount of damage. More importantly, you really need good stats for Juri. So very high weakness hit, very high crit rate is going to be very beneficial. So Karma now, I'm actually using this team with Taka and Feng Yan for phase 1. Okay, phase 1 is very difficult. Okay, you have to take some time to kill Karma, because I've seen many players not be able to clear phase 1 for Karma because of just how tanky he is. So having 2 DPSs is much preferred. Gear wise, I think most of you will know the DPSs will have the Avenger set and the supports will all have block sets. I think this is very typical by now. Something you just have to keep in mind based on how to gear units based on their roles. For Karma, you can safely debuff him, so don't worry about that. Spam all your debuffs to set up. I'm also using Seek here for attack increase. He's the attack buffer basically. I'm using Kagura for crit damage increase. Kagura is actually a very unique character here, which I'll talk about a bit later. And then finally for Bidam, he's on the Avenger set with pretty high block rate, crit rate so that, and also decent attack stats, so that the bleed he lands will be better. And I've also given him the attack pad instead and given the crit pad to Taka and Feng Yan, who really do need to crit. So here I start off with Feng Yan's bottom skill, which actually lands defense down, but I should have just started with, Lina's top skill instead to actually buff my damage output and also then land the defense down. So I don't have to actually use Feng Yan's bottom skill for debuff purposes. I can save it for DPS purposes. And then I actually use Ace's top skill. He actually lands physical vulnerability on Karma so that all my DPS, both DPSs can do better damage. Then I will use Feng Yan's skills, and then unfortunately he didn't crit there. And then I will actually use Taka's skills later on. Again, take note that for Taka, his top skill benefits the lower the enemy HP, especially below 30%. Okay, so you can't really save his top skill for later because you really want to just do as much damage as you can now. But once you're heading towards that 30% HP threshold, then you want to kind of hold back on his top skill and use it once you have confirmed that Karma's HP is 30% or below. So I don't really use Eileen's skill because it's not really useful. Okay, she's really just there for physical attack boost passively. So as you can see here, Karma just used up all his stacks, and I'm a bit worried because previously I wasn't using Lina here. I was actually using Lina on team 2, but I realized that without a healer, my units actually were dying. They were being hit so hard once Karma has built up his stacks, so that is why I brought Lina here instead. I mean, Lina kind of has universal benefits in terms of buffing and healing, so anywhere you use her it's fine. It's just that, you know, using a healing skill in phase 1 kind of takes up one entire skill turn in that case, so not too ideal, but what can we do, man? Here Taka goes crazy because Karma's HP is actually already below 30% as I mentioned. So what's next is to do as much damage to Karma as possible. So we move into phase 2. This is the first time I'm showcasing phase 2. I actually buff with Biscuit first, land debuff with Rachel, and finally throw both of Bidam's skills. Hopefully we get it in before turn 70. This is the only way you can do damage to Karma. And I'm using Kagura here for crit damage increase, but if you do have a T6 Kagura, which is very rare I know, but T6 Kagura kind of functions the same way as Vanessa, whereby they both apply a certain type of vulnerability on the enemy so that you can do more damage. And this is the first time I've seen Vidam actually being used. His Bleed Explosion was actually very decent in terms of getting the score up high. So yeah, with that, I've come to the end for this video. I hope it helped in terms of showing you guys some other variations of teams compared to the ones I've made to actually tackle Advent Expedition properly, because by now you should already be having 7 possible entries. So make good use of those entries in terms of scoring, and hopefully your guild will be able to take down the bosses. If you found this video helpful, do give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for more videos. Thank you so much and see you!